Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Crisis and Turnaround Management. This is a teaching video on how to deal with crisis, and of course it's inspired by the current corona crisis. The learning objectives for this module are: first, to understand the concept of crisis and crisis management. Second, comprehend the logic of different crisis strategies. Third, define your own response to a shock or crisis. And fourth, remember the performance management tools that we learned before. Crisis management is requiring to have all the knowledge and everything that we learned at hand. This is the king of management. In crisis management, the men are distinguished from the boys, the queens from the girls. This is a very tough and fascinating business. Here, quick decisions are important, and it's all about survival or discontinuation of your business. Crisis management. Yes, companies can be exposed to crises like the corona pandemic, like war situations, terrorist attacks, or financial crises. All of these have been real, they are there, and they need responses. Crisis management can thus be defined as a course of action by which an organization deals with a disruptive and surprising event which threatens the functioning or even survival of an organization and requires timely responses. In contrast to risk management, we are not trying to anticipate the future and come up with ideal ways to mitigate risks. No, here we are in the middle of the action. Something has already terribly gone wrong, and now we have to deal with this special situation. And crisis management is a very comprehensive management challenge. It requires a broad set of skills, from strategic, financial, and performance management, because you have to understand the markets, you have to provide finance, and be very, very careful to monitor your performance, as well as business acumen and special legal knowledge which is necessary. This is a very, very interesting job. And there are even special advisories who are specialized on crisis and turnaround management. So if you like the heat of the action, if you like to be exposed to threatening events, if you like to also see the power of changing the entire business models and transforming businesses, you are very well positioned in the realm of crisis management. Before we go into details, let's talk about the business narratives that we can hear about crisis management. First, crisis is the new and the old normal. What does it mean? Even Schumpeter defined capitalism as a process of creative destruction. Destruction is part of the DNA of capitalism. So it has always been like this. Change is happening, and dramatic change will be perceived as a crisis by those who are at the receiving end of this. Why is it new? The new normal means that this kind of disruption and this kind of change has seen an acceleration that is quite important. And so, yes, crisis is the constant state of business. If we have little harbors of guaranteed profits, usually we're probably in a situation that is not quite legal. Second, Crisis means threat and opportunity, at least in Chinese. And yes, a crisis might threaten the survival of your business, but if you're well prepared, you could actually create huge fortunes in a crisis. Crisis is the time to generate large fortunes, has always been so and will probably always be like this. If you're in an organization or even as an individual, resilience has become one of the hot topics over the last years, and now within the Corona crisis, it seems to be obvious that resilience was something that we wanted to have or we should have developed. The idea is that we should prepare before the crisis so that we develop the capabilities and competencies to act during the crisis, survive it, and come out of it stronger than before. And 4, never let a good crisis go to waste. What does that mean? This is a quote that's falsely attributed to Winston Churchill, but it means something. It means that a crisis is an opportunity to overcome long-standing resistance, to get change through at conditions that would have been unthinkable in normal times. A good crisis is the time for action, the time for strategists, and yes, it's time for the fearless to encounter and conquer the world. Crisis. So what is a crisis and what does it mean for companies? Let's have a look at the current Corona pandemic. So not every company perceives the crisis as a crisis. There are companies like Amazon who immediately said, yes, we want to hire another 75,000 people in the US alone because this is the opportunity of a lifetime to grow. There are other companies also in Berlin who are catering the needs of digital business and digital collaboration. And for them, this is like a gold rush. So what is a crisis for a company? Usually we distinguish 3 different crises. The first one being the strategy crisis. The strategy crisis means that our business model is no longer competitive, or the market we used to serve has ceased to exist. So what does it mean? Or maybe I give you 2 examples. Let's take the example of Nokia handheld devices. Nokia was until 2010 the uncontested market leader in smartphones. 2008-9 we saw the beginning of the iPhone, and the iPhone offered such a superior product that was evident from the start that Nokia was sitting on a burning platform and had a strategic issue. Their business model and their product was no longer competitive. So that's one thing. And if you look at what's happening right now, we also see that there are some situations where markets have, with immediate effect, ceased to exist. Let's take the example of night clubbings or restaurant offerings. Here we have a situation where probably for a month to go in Berlin, we won't have the opportunity to go out at night or to even have dinner with friends. But for the restaurants do have costs. So for them, this is a real threatening crisis. Their market is still not there. And we are in a situation where the business model might be competitive or not, but if there's no market, we have a strategic crisis. Second, and the strategic crisis leads into the second crisis, which is the operational crisis. The operational crisis means we cannot serve our markets profitably. So if there's no market, of course we accumulate costs, but we have no revenues. That means we grow in our loss situation, and these losses are just indication that we've left the profitable growth path that is important, and that it's a good indication that we are on a strategically sound path, and started to accumulate losses. And this accumulation of losses will lead sooner or later to the situation that we end up in a liquidity crisis, that we're simply running out of cash, which means we have to cease our operations. You might say that, or we might see different cases where from strategy crisis to liquidity crisis it might take several years. In the case of Nokia, that was more than 5 years. But right now, in the situation of the corona pandemic, we have companies for which this is a situation from strategy crisis to liquidity crisis can be a question of 2 or 3 months, or even just a month. So when we talk about crisis for companies, be precise what it means and what the situation is. So we need cash, that's clear, but we also have to be profitable, and third, we need to offer a competitive business model. Otherwise, sooner or later, we'll end up in a crisis. And usually, our crisis is the opportunity of our competitors. So, what crisis? When we think about our crisis, we have to think about our business model. Let's do this exercise again and think about our customers, think about our value proposition in the current situation, think about the processes that we offer. Right now in the pandemic situation around Corona, we see a lot of companies are reconsidering their value processes, which mostly depend on producing in China and selling in Europe, for example, and now that they see the vulnerability of their supply chains. Customers are a huge topic. If our customers are going bankrupt or are prevented from selling, from buying our processes, buying our services and products, that's a huge issue. What can we do to reach them differently? Yes, and the business model check is something that is a constant reminder of finding out what is happening. Our competition might come up with new products and services, might have aggressive moves ahead. All of this, the business model check, is an attempt to preempt business crises, is an attempt to become proactive in solving the constant puzzle to stay ahead of your competitors in serving your customers and maintain a profitable growth path. So I like to refer to my other teaching video on strategic planning and the business model check to go into details. But when we think about crisis, any kind of crisis, think about your business model and how it's fit to the current situation is, and whether there's immediate need for action. When there is a crisis, like the corona pandemic, or it could be anything, it could be a terrorist attack, it could be a financial crisis, the controllers and performance managers starting to generate scenarios, what's going to happen. So what will be the immediate and long-term effects of this shock, of this new situation? And I come up with the completely fictional case of the HWR Inc. And most of the performance managers agreed on the following scenario, where we had original plan, that's the total one, and we see that we originally wanted to have sales in 2020 of 2.5 billion, and we see that there will be a gap, and a huge gap of 1 billion euros in the first year, and in total we will probably accumulate, due to the long-lasting effects of this crisis, we'll accumulate a 3.5 billion gap in revenues. And of course, that means there's a huge gap in profits, or if we do not do anything, a huge challenge for compensating compensating the sales gap by cost cuts. So here we also have 3 different divisions, and we see that the divisions are not equally hit by the crisis. Especially Division A is hit very hard, and we also see that the long-term decline of the market will probably be accelerated through the current shock. Whereas Division B might be more or less affected, and Division C will continue to grow. But what can we do? If this is a scenario that we agree on, this is the so-called base scenario, the most probable one, and we might also have a worst case scenario, we might have an optimistic scenario, but let's work with the base scenario. We also see that a lot has to happen. When we have 1 billion less in sales, and depending on our business model, this means probably there's a lot of fixed cost attached to it, then we have to start restructuring our business. That's very evident. We have to secure liquidity. We have to do something huge and substantial to go through the years. We have to change our long-term plan. We have to change our budgets. We have to dramatically change our forecasts. So the scenario planning is at the beginning of every every crisis management. We have to assess the new situation. So what is the new likely outcome for the next years? And our plans that existed beforehand will probably be outdated. And based on that, we will have to stop investments, we have to stop hiring people, we have to change our plans and see what we can do. So scenarios. Scenarios are anticipations of the future, and they are quantitative and qualitative assessments of future states. And these scenarios are not innocent. They are the basis for real management decisions, and they can be very tough, but probably necessary to guarantee the survival and return to a profitable growth path of our company. So what to do? Of course, it all depends on our situation, but I have come up with 4 different crisis strategies. There are 2 dimensions. The one is the temporary dimension, it means short-term or long-term, and the other one is more into preserving or radically changing our business model. So let's start with the first one, short-term preservation of our business, which I called hold your breath. This strategy means we probably just try to hold our breath, add a few resources, and wade our way through the crisis. So probably we are very confident that life will resume as originally planned, and that there will be great opportunities after the current meltdown. Second would be the exit strategy. What does exit mean? That means we close our business. That means we do not see any future markets, that we do not see a possibility to transform and turn around our current business situation. An exit means we stop our operations, we sell, or we just close. Cut to the core means we have to change our company in such a way that we have to cut all non-essential business. We have to cut to the bone. We have to close plants, we have to close shops, we have to close whole markets and product lines in order to stay competitive in a substantially reduced market even after the current crisis situation. This is not a wonderful situation to be in, but it's probably this cost-cutting orgy is probably something that all the companies do. And if you do it wisely, you do not cut out all the opportunities that will arise from the markets going back to life. Yes, and there's another maybe risky but fantastic way of using the crisis, which is a transformation. Use your resources that you have to radically transform your business model, and think that and take the opportunities that the crisis offers to shift your business focus, to shift your business model, to shift markets, shift people, and become something completely new. So let's go through the different strategies. So first, hold your breath. So the idea is to sustain your business through the finite crisis. Finite means, hey, it will end. It might take a month, it might take 2 months or even 3 months, but this is not the end of the world. This is something like a blip in the market, and we will see a market that will recovery of that market, and maybe even a V-shaped recovery. So what can we do? We have to secure funding and financial reserves. So go to the bank, make sure that you have credit lines, make sure that you have enough cash, make sure that you are able to sustain a few months or even more without going bankrupt. And then you keep your key resources. So you keep them busy if you can. You might, with the help of states, for example, we have in Germany the Kurzarbeitergeld, we can keep them busy, or we can reduce the amount of money we have to pay for our employees, but keeping them busy, this is especially true for our machines, is the best way to deal with our resources. And number 3, of course, we have to prepare for the resuming business. And this will mean after the crisis, eventually some of our competitors won't be there anymore. And this is a huge opportunity for bigger market share afterwards. KPIs to watch are cash reach. That means how long can we sustain ourselves with the cash at hand based on the cash outflow, on the plannable cash outflow. That could be a date, it could be days or weeks, or could be months. This is a very important KPI to watch if you want to continue with a hold your breath strategy. If you understand that there is no future for your business, the discontinuation might be a viable option to minimize losses, right? Would be much better to exit than to just be pushed aside. And yes, exit can be a legitimate strategy in a crisis. You have to know when it's time to leave. So if you act fast before you're forced out, you might actually find that there are beneficial conditions for closing a business, that there's a buyer that wants to take over your business, or you have to prepare for closure. You might say that closing in some countries might involve a lot of additional payments for workers, social plans, and so on. And maybe you can the crisis is exactly the moment where you cannot afford to close a plant, but maybe you can find a buyer and let him or her take care of the problem. Whenever you want to minimize losses by discontinuing parts of your business, make sure that there might be some critical resources that you want to secure, especially if we are talking about one part of your business that you want to get rid of. So the same is true if you for Harvey Air, the Harvey Air Inc. We know that maybe there's different divisions, and maybe there are some divisions where you might think about selling right now. Maybe the A division is something that right now we might find somebody who believes that there is a possible and positive solution for integrating Division A into their existing business and riding the storm of the end game in the particular market. Yes, but coming back to securing critical resources, some of our people, some of the patents that are in that business should be secured beforehand. It should be clear that maybe some of the management potentials that we see there, some of the key players we want to keep, make sure that you have different places in your corporate structure and other areas of your business. So, and then cut to the core. This is an exercise that's really not funny, and it's really a tough business. We talk about downsizing operations and closing all non-core activities. And we don't do that because we are all sadists or we all want to make people suffer. No, it's because we want to survive as a company. And cutting down is not easy. Who would cut down his own arm? So this is the same for companies. If we cut too deep, we are also taking all the opportunities from the market away. So if we cut into our sales force, if we cut into our workforce, if we bring down our capacity, we won't be able to participate in the growth after the crisis. All of that will be gone. So be very careful with this cut to the core strategy, because this cutting to the core might eventually lead into a non-reversible decline, and then it's difficult to save a business if all our best employees are leaving, if we are making life miserable for those who are left. It is a complicated thing. Nonetheless, it might be important to survive in the long term, even as a niche player. So first of all, downsize operations, close non-core activities. This might be right now a lot of digital startups that we played around with. There might be a lot of initiatives that we found very attractive, but haven't so far materialized any important gains. So all our experiments, some of them will be fruitful, some are probably the pets of the top management, but this is a moment where we have to reduce them, and the knife has to be sharp to cut costs along the lines. This is number two. Become a lean and mean company. Do all the gymnastics needed to become fitter and meaner and survive the game, right? Prepare, this is a preparation for substantially reduction in the resuming business. So I just heard that McDonald's is planning for substantially subdued business prospects for years to come. Yes, and why not? This is a situation where you probably cut your business to reduce losses and to guarantee, that guarantee is a big word, but to try to survive in a cutthroat market. Number 4, what are the KPIs to watch? Probably headcount reductions. That was one of my job as the first job as head of strategy. I just started the business, and it was during the 2008-9 financial crisis. And one of the first things that came on my table was, oh no, Avo, we have 1,650 people that we have to get rid of by the end of the year. So make sure that you track the efforts and report on the success. So headcount reductions, capacity reductions, that could be machine hours, could be plants, could be machines, and of course, last but not least, cost reduction. This is important to compensate for the revenue reductions, because revenue minus costs, this is a profit, and if the costs are bigger than the revenues, this is a loss, and sustained losses is not the sustaining losses is not the idea of running a company. The idea is to make money and work in the interest of the stakeholders. Anyways, reduce your business scope for survival seems to be the natural first strategy to do in any crisis situation. But maybe it's not the most intelligent one, and maybe you can go too far by cutting too deeply into your future revenues. And of course, there's the option to transform. The transformation strategy would mean that you innovate and disrupt your own business model in the crisis. So you take advantage of the crisis for radical change. So an example would be Axel Springer. Axel Springer, who took the digitalization and from 2003 on drastically invested into digital content and sold print companies. So take advantage of the crisis for radical change. If you're in a situation where your business model is declining, where you know that there's no future, maybe take this crisis as a wonderful opportunity to change. Broaden the scope of your business and start new ventures. Start new ventures, start R&D. Maybe you don't know exactly where you will end up, but this is normal. If you do not orchestrate a seemingly chaotic way of new starts, then probably you won't end up anywhere. So broaden the scope of your business, start new venture, and start R&D. You might say this is rather risky. Yes, absolutely, it's risky because you take the available resources that you have, maybe you get even new resources, and you might use the overall decline in the market as an opportunity for opportunistic acquisitions. There will probably be some lucky buys where you can buy companies below their real value because they're insolvent, because they're broke. So not easy. Broaden your scope, start new ventures, R&D, invest and buy new companies. This sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? On top of that, you disinvest business parts that probably are no longer sustainable. And there might be opportunities to get rid of them in a much cheaper way, or in a much easier way than usual. Because yes, there's a general problem with the economy, and there might be legal options to get out of the market cheaper than usual. Yes, the transformation strategy is it's let's face it, it is the most risky strategy. Probably you could lose all, but you could also win quite a lot. Changing your business, changing your company is a huge challenge. So it takes a lot of corporate governance, and strong corporate governance, and gut and risk-taking spirit to do it. But if you can do it right, this might be a recipe for future success. KPIs to watch are innovation rate, the sales of new business. In the case of Axel Springer, one of the key KPIs was what's the percentage of sales that is done digitally? What's the percentage of EBIT that is earned digitally? And within a few years, let's say within 7 years, they dramatically digitalized their own business. They wouldn't have they could have also just reduced costs, but no, they have transformed themselves. Definitely a risky strategy, and we'll see how they will develop over the next years. And they have invested a lot of money. They have changed, and there's no guarantee that this was a successful strategy. We'll find out. There's no guarantee for success. Capitalism is a process of creative destruction. Crisis is the normal situation. Crisis management. Yes, there are also other aspects. So for example, leadership and crisis communication are a key ingredient for any good crisis strategy. Leadership is also a huge challenge, because if you don't know yourself where to go, and if you have no crystal ball that will tell you how and when the market will resume, it's very complicated to give this kind of information on to your employees. Then that will probably run away from you. But this is part of the job, to instill trust and loyalty even in times of crisis. Second, stakeholder management. Stakeholder management is so important. You have the owners of the company, you have the banks, but you also have the employees who have to bear part of the crisis. You have to deal with your vendors, you have to deal with your customers. All of them are part of this situation that you're in, and carefully managing all of them is an important ingredient for future success. And third, beware of blind actionism. In all corporations, everyone has some plan in the cupboard, would say, hey, wonderful, I always wanted to do this and this and that, and I always heard it's not possible, there's political resistance, and so on and so on. But maybe these are not good ideas at all. So just firing everyone is not a good idea. So first start with scenario planning, then look into what is possible, what is your marge de maneuver, where can you go, what is still meaningful to do. And of course, resilience program would be nice. usually building resilience, that means maybe huge equity rate, or dealings with your banks, that you have credit lines, long-term agreements with your employees, trustful relationship with them. All of this could be a resilience program. A resilience program means that you can prepare for crisis, that you become resilient. Will probably mean that you're prepared for whatever it takes, and you will come out stronger than before. Doesn't mean that crisis is overall good, but resilience programs that have been very popular over the last years on personal coaching could also be good for companies as such. Pandemic plans, all of this could be part of risk management. But what makes your company even more resilient in the face of the crisis? That would be a different topic. Crisis and turnaround management. Here we go. This is just a brief introduction into this huge topic, but you see, it involves everything we've done before and even more. It looks into, first of all, into our operational performance cycle. We take our budgets, we see that what is happening with our performance, we have to control and assess what's going on. This is the key, and the re-budgeting and reassessment of what's happening is very important step. It also means that we have to look into our micro performance loops. We have to look into our business processes, our value processes, and see what we can do better, how can we quickly work around, how can we look into new ways of short-term finding new revenue streams. This kind of micro performance loop can be decisive on our short-term success. Michelin star restaurants might become restaurants where you have to go and fetch your pre-ordered lunch or pre-ordered dinner. You might say that's not good for the company, but yes, that might be a way to get additional money right now and keep your personnel happy. Of course, there are long-term aspects to it. Your strategic plan will probably suffer dramatically from what's happening in the crisis. And your plans will suffer dramatically. There might be a lot of plans that will change now. There are a lot of investments that you will not be able to do. A lot of decisions that were taken but that have to be revised. So crisis and turnaround management is a huge, interesting topic, but it basically is strategic management and with a close look into your operational and micro performance loop. So all the things that we learned will come here in crisis and turnaround management, very intense doses. That makes crisis and turnaround management probably one of the most interesting and intense areas of business. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this teaching video.